Thank you, Kyle. Good morning to each and every one of you. It's a tremendous day. It's a day that is set aside to worship God, and we are truly thankful for that. It's a day that somebody decided that we'd honor fathers. I'm glad for that. I had a great daddy. I loved and appreciated and will take to the grave his memory and love every aspect of it. To all of you who are fathers, as Kyle said, whether it's 1 time, 2 times, 4 times, 27 times, it's great, isn't it? Someone wished me a happy Father's Day early this morning, and I said, it's great to be a dad, and I meant that. It's also great to be a pawpaw, too. I like that. Pawpaw about as much fun, if not more fun, than being a dad. But it's good. We are glad that you are here. We do have several who are visiting with us this morning, and we appreciate you being here, and we hope and pray that the things that we present will please God. We're here to worship Him, John 4 and verse 24. God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him. Must. That's certainly a word we don't like as human beings. We like to do the things we want to do, and we don't want to have to meet requirements. But God said there are some requirements. Isn't it a wonderful thing, though, when you can get these things together, and God's must is my enjoyment. It don't get any better than that. When you're pleasing God to the very best of your ability, and that's what you love to do, that is a wonderful combination. I hope that's where you are in your life. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 17. 1 Peter 2:17. It says in the King James Version, honor all men. If you'll notice that men, that's an italicized word, and really the Greek says honor all. And that's what we're supposed to do. Honor all, love the brotherhood, fear God, and honor the king. Very simple passage. And let me point out something maybe you've never seen in regards to this passage before. There are 4 items that are mentioned. First one is honor all. And that is a Greek aorist imperative. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because I want to dictate an action. It is a one-time action. We might say it this way. I'm honoring Gary today on his retirement from the fire department. Well, you didn't do that when he was working for the fire department, and they probably won't continue to have parties 100 years after Gary's retired from the fire department. It's kind of a one-time occasion. And when it says honor all men, that's what it's saying. From time to time, it is it's good. It's respectful. It's something that we should do. When people reach accomplishments in their life, we should honor them. But then the next 3 terms, when it says love the brotherhood, fear God, and honor the king, it is aorist present imperative, which means continuous action. Now, how does that play in our life? Well, it's easy sometimes to do it once in a while. I love Gary once or twice a year. Out of 365 days, I can stand him a couple of days out of the year. But do we, in regards to what God has established, and I love our brotherhood. Do I love our brotherhood all the time? And since I've picked on Gary, I'll put him in a good light now. We've talked about this before. One of the things that we don't like, and I started to use a stronger term, Gary, but I will leave it right there. Something that we don't like is somebody who criticizes the brotherhood just for the sake of criticizing God's kingdom, God's people, God's law, this is a blood-bought institution. We're brothers and sisters in Christ. If I've got aught against my brother, what am I supposed to do? Get out and backbite and chew and devour and destroy? No. 1,000 times no. Well, maybe just one time. No. No, you're supposed to love the brotherhood today, tomorrow, the next day, and the day after that. Well, what if some things go wrong? Fix it. What's hard about that? Fix it. Learn how to love the brotherhood. Learn how to love each other. If someone goes astray, we ought to love them enough to go and get them. Just like the shepherd that had the 100 sheep. One goes astray. What does he do? I forget that one. I still got 99. What difference does it? No, he left the 99 and went and retrieved the one. We look at this term honor. A lot of times I don't know that we understand the true meaning of it is a valuing, putting a value on something. Today's a good day to use this lesson and the fact that it's Father's Day. Children that value their parents will go out of their way to do something. You know, they love them. They appreciate them. And I'm not trying to make Anna and Kyle think they need to rush out and get me a gift. That's not what I'm trying to say. That's not it at all. The greatest gift about being a daddy is the fact that you have those children. And you really don't want anything else. The accomplishments that they make in their life are enough for you. It's as David talking about having his quiver full. And when you have the blessing of children, our lives are full. But I want to get back to this concept of honoring. And basically I want to look at honoring all. And how do we accomplish this? How do you go about honoring all? Well, I think there's a couple of things that we can look at that maybe will give us an indicator in relationship to how we are to honor all. I think it has to do more or less with our attitude than anything else. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I think, first of all, we accomplish this honoring all through the avenue of love. Through love. Let me just read some passages to you. I want to break these passages, and I don't have them broken down in your outline. But the first four are really talking about the way we're supposed to love our neighbor. In Mark 12 and verse 31, the second is like unto, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, and there is none other commandment greater than these. We are to love our neighbor. How many of us do that? When you look at the parable of the Good Samaritan, and in that parable, the question is asked, to who is my neighbor? And I've always said he asked the wrong question. He should have asked, to whom should I be a neighbor to? Should we be a neighbor to that person that you're passing on the highway, and bless their heart, there's maybe a mama and they've got 2 or 3 little old children, and she's sitting there with a hood up on her car and you see it smoking and she looks desperate? Is that a neighbor? You know, sometimes we're so blessed that we forget how difficult it is. Do you remember how it was starting off? Do you remember how you thought you could live on love and it didn't take you long to realize you needed a sandwich to go with that? And that sandwich cost $2.50 and you didn't have but $2. And somebody was good enough to buy you a $2.50 sandwich, and it seemed like the world to you, but it was really something that was small to them. And then we get this concept of passing it on, passing it on. Please don't take my joy away from me. Let me pass on to you what somebody did for me. I lived in Arkansas. Cindy and I lived in Arkansas. And those people were great to us. They were great to us. We were just getting started. We're 5 hours away from our family. I couldn't run over to Daddy's and borrow a hammer. It took too long to get there and way too much gas. I'd have been better off just to go ahead and buy the hammer. But those people blessed us in so many, many ways. Our oldest daughter, Leah, her first grandparents were in Arkansas, even though her real grandparents were here in Alabama. They loved us. They helped us. There were times, I remember Brother Jimmy Manley, and you might think this is insignificant, but it wasn't insignificant to me then, and it's not insignificant to me now. He'd have his boat hooked up. He's got his gas in his truck. He's got his gas and his motor in his boat. He's got all the fishing equipment in the world, and he says, "You want to go fishing?" Well, I can barely pay for a fishing license, and I can't pay my half. You know what he told me one time? "Who asked you? Who asked you to pay?" Well, you know what? When we honor individuals, we honor them with our love, with our heart. Here's how we're supposed to treat our neighbor. Romans 13 and verse 10, "Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore love is the fulfilling of the law." Look then in chapter 15, verses 1 and 2 of the book of Romans. "We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves." And please underline that. Not to please ourselves. And that don't mean you shouldn't ever get your way. That's not what it's saying. But it's saying this shouldn't be the only purpose in our life is to please ourselves. Let me tell you something, you'll get a lot greater benefits and blessing out of helping somebody else than you will helping yourself. When you see the joy, when you receive back the love that you are demonstrating, you tell me which is greater. Verse 2 says, "Let every one of us please his neighbor for his good to edification." To building them up is that purpose. And then in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 14, "For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." I'm going to tell you something. Last Sunday morning, when I started the meeting up in Springville, I think it was the day before, or maybe it was 2 days before that, when the shooting had occurred in Virginia. And there is so much hatred in our country right now, it's unbelievable. And my heart was breaking. If there's ever been a time in this old world that we needed to preach Christ and His love, it's now. It's now. I don't care who you vote for, and I don't care what you are. Put me in the category of a nothing. Put me in the category of a Christian. I want to please God. And Him only do I want to serve. Brethren, it's time for us to accomplish this honoring of everyone. How? It's done through our love. You can see this command in relationship to our neighbors. And sometimes we say, well, that's not too difficult. Let's talk about family. Oh, I can honor my mama and daddy. Look what they did for me, and it's not hard for me to love them. Oh, and I can think about old Mr. So-and-so just down the road. He's been a good neighbor. He used to let us borrow this, and we'd go over and help him, and we've been good neighbors for a long time. I can love him. What about your enemies? Well, now, wait a second, preacher. You're just about to get across the line here now. Look at Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. And I find it so interesting that this passage is coming right after the Beatitudes. Now, when you look at the Beatitudes, you see the laws established. But right after verse 12, rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. When you start with verse 13, now he's going to put it into application. Here's what I want you to do. Now let's see if you can do it. And then you get down to verse 43. You've heard that it had been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. First of all, love your neighbor is in God's Word. Hate thine enemy was a deduction that the Jews had made. Hate your neighbor is not found in the Bible. Hate your enemy, is not found in the Bible. Nowhere is it commanded. Nowhere is it expected. As a matter of fact, right the opposite. And Christ is fixing to say, but I say unto you, love your enemies. He's lost his mind. How am I supposed to love my enemies? Well, you're going to see if, and here's what tickles me about what Christ said, and then how we make application. Oh, we just love the Beatitudes, don't we? Oh, blessed are the poor in spirit. Oh, those poor people, we just love them to death. Oh, blessed are they that mourn. Oh, the meek, those that hunger and thirst after righteousness, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, those that are persecuted. You know why we love those things? Because we think practically none of that applies to us. It's easy to do something when it doesn't apply to you. But what Christ says is, here's the law, now let's put it into practical applications. How do you apply these principles to somebody you don't like? To your enemy? I'm going to tell you right now, it hits home, don't it? Is there a politician that you can think of right now that you really don't have great admiration for? Or maybe one that just left office? Or maybe one that's about to take office? But what gives me the right as a Christian to abhor or hate that individual? The Bible doesn't. The Bible says right the opposite. See, that's when all of a sudden it starts to get hard. Well, that's not what I want to do, Gary. I want to be angry at this man because I disagree with him. But you still got to love him. You got to honor the king. You know, sometimes you just wish that the Bible didn't say that, but it does. You can't wish the Bible away. You can't change it and make it fit what you want it to fit and say, well, now that's the Bible. No, we've got to take it like it is. He says, love your enemies. What about people we don't even know? How are you going to honor all men? Look at Matthew chapter 25. I love this. Matthew chapter 25, beginning in about verse 34. The king shall say unto them on his right hand, come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the earth. For I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. I need this more than anybody does. So y'all just sit there a little bit and I'll talk to myself. How many times have you been in a hospital? Or how many times have you been in a nursing home? And there's that little bitty person. Nobody visits. Nobody seems to care about. Oh, but you're so busy. We're just like the priest and Levite, aren't we? We got to hustle on about our business. But if you took the time to say just a kind word to somebody in that situation, what would it mean to them? And so you got to, we're fixing to get to the them part. We got to get ourselves out of the way before we can get to them. We got to get us and me and mine and I. And we got to get them out of the way before we can get to those folks that we need to be honoring. I told you, Christianity is not for the faint of heart. It's not for, the sissies. This is, you're going to have to buckle up. You're going to have to get ready. You're going to have to strap in. You're going to have to be the individual that says, you know what, this is what I need to do. I'm not doing this in my life, and I need to change. And when we look at our lives that way, and I love that James put it this way, about the man beholding himself in a mirror and leaveth and straightway forgetteth what manner of person he was. When we forget to take care of the small things. And don't you love Matthew chapter 25? What's huge in there? You can give somebody a sandwich. You can give them a drink. You can go visit. You can see them in prison. You can go to the hospital. You can see them. You can have a kind word. Not going to cost you a single solitary thing. Except it's going to cost you everything. You got to make up your mind whether or not you're going to put it in for Christ or I don't have enough time. The next point, y'all shouldn't have come this morning, that's all I can tell you. It's after a gospel meeting, and I always get fired up after gospel meetings, but I'll hush quickly, I'm promising you. I'm going to make two more points, and these points are short. I think we honor all men is accomplished through love. It's accomplished through selflessness. I told you we were going to talk about the them. You got to get the I's and the me's and the my's out of the way before you can get to those individuals. What does it mean to these individuals to go by and say hello? The more I think about it, the more I realize that I ought to do a better job. I love Romans 15, verses 1 and 2. Passage we've already read. We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. The ones that are strong ought to bear up the infirmities. What a long way it will go in someone's life when we take the opportunity to encourage them. I want you to turn to Romans chapter 12. Let's read for a minute. Romans chapter 12. I want to start in verse 3. I just want to read some passages. I want you to listen to them, and you tell me how you're going to accomplish these things unless you get rid of selfishness. Romans chapter 12, verse 3. For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. Number one, here's how you deal with selfishness. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. Who in the world is a preacher to think he is more important than the individual that's sitting in the congregation that's hurting the most? We're all out of whack if that's what we think. Look at verse 10. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honoring, preferring one to another. See, there's our word again, honor. How do you do it? Honoring one another, preferring one another. Then look down in verse 13. Distributing to the necessity of the saints, given to hospitality. Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that do weep. There was a time, folks, there was a time when Christians used to take time. It takes time. It takes time to go to a funeral home. Anybody got any more time than 24 hours in a day? Anybody else get any more time than 7 days in a week? Anybody get any more than 365 days out of the year? No. But if I'm wanting to encourage somebody, and especially, and we've had 2 families this week who have lost loved ones, and I've seen many of you at funeral homes and at funerals and things of this nature, and you are to be commended. But I want all of us just to stop and to think for a second. How did we use our time? Did we use our time in encouraging these others? Do we take the time to visit in the nursing homes? Do we take the time to go to hospitals? Do we take the time to pick up a phone and say thank you? Do we take the time to jot a note down on a card and say, missed you? Hope to see you next week. Well, preacher, I don't have that much time. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. The thing about it is, it's how we use our time. It's how we use our time. Then start in verse 17. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. Wow, wait a second. A while ago, back in Matthew chapter 25, we're talking about strangers or acquaintances or maybe even friends. But now here it says, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. Why? If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Here's the reason you do all of these things. Here's the reason why you honor all men, why you love the brotherhood. Here's the reason why you fear God and honor the King. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, I don't know I don't know how you interpret that or these passages right here, but here's how I interpret them. It's time to quit playing as a Christian and become a Christian. It's time to open your heart and to, when you say, I love you, really mean it. Not in a two-faced situation. That's verse 9 here in Romans chapter 12. Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. Our love should not be a matter of hypocrisy. It should not be a matter of two-facedness. It should be genuine, deep. It should be, this is who we are. This is who we're supposed to be. And if we're not, then I'm afraid we're missing what Christ would want us to see. John 13:34 and 35. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Look at verse 35. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if you have love one toward another. By this they'll know. They'll know. What does the world know about us? We don't need to be those folks that sit behind closed doors and never reach out to our community. And I don't believe that's who we are. Our eldership does a great job. We have individuals that handle, just like our food pantry, that reaches out and we help. We love. We encourage. We do everything that we possibly can. We just need to prune back those bushes and those limbs, and let's produce more. That's all we need to do. Let's kindly urge ourselves to be better in what we're doing. The last point is accomplished through our actions. When you see our attitudes ultimately are going to be seen through our actions. 1 John 3 and verse 18. My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. Don't let us love in word alone. I hope you tell somebody you love them today. But then I hope you back it up with some kind of action in deed or in truth in relationship to the things that we do to our life. We honor all. I'm going to close by, here's a note I jotted down when I was writing this sermon. How do we honor all? We honor all, and I believe you can put book, chapter, and verse with every one of these things. Honor all men. How? Through our hospitality, through our benevolence, through our good works, through our actions. How do you honor the brotherhood? You do that through promoting. You do that through provoking. You do that through preserving. You do that by allowing the world to see genuine Christianity. Fear God. And I don't think that, I know it doesn't have in connection with it the fact that we're afraid of God. No, this has reverence. We're to reverence God. How do you do that? Well, you do that in everything you do, in life and in godliness, in our work, in our actions, in our speech, in our dress, who we are. We represent, or we do not represent God. And then in the last place, honor the king. How do you honor the king? Well, you obey the law. Number one, we are supposed to be law-abiding citizens. Simply because we don't like what's being said or done in Washington or somewhere else doesn't give us the right to break the law. The only time a Christian has the right to disregard the law of the land, Acts chapter 4 and Acts chapter 5, when Peter said we ought to obey God rather than men. If Washington establishes a law that I can't teach the truth on any subject, I'm sorry, and if this microphone goes straight to the president, hear it well. I'm going to preach the truth. You can do with it what you want to. That's it. That's not about it. That's it. I'm obligated to God first. And if prison comes in my life because I preach the truth, then we need to get back over there in 1 Peter again, and we need to look at Matthew chapter 5 and look at verses 13 through 16. If we're persecuted for righteousness' sake, the passage that gets me is 1 Peter 4 and verse 13. After he's talked about the difficulties, the persecutions in verse 12, rejoice. How in the world do you rejoice when the difficulties of life come? I love what Brother Duncan wrote, which was, you rejoice by the faith that you have in God. And that's exactly right. There are a lot of people whose faith aren't strong enough. And when they're not strong enough, they give up. They quit. They turn in. They yield to what Satan would want them to do, as opposed to one who's facing the difficulties and can face it with a smile, because they realize that while we're here on earth, we're only here for a short time, but then we're going home and we're going to receive our reward. And our reward is greater than anything that we have to suffer right now. But if I'm doom and gloom, and that's what the world is seeing in me, doom and gloom, you tell me that you're representing Christ as you ought to represent Him. You're not. We need to honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, and honor the King. If you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, you can become one. How? Through your faith, repentance, confession, and baptism. If you've done these things, but yet you've fallen short of the glory of God, you need to come back. Maybe you need to light that light back in your life. No better time to do it than right now. Would you come as together we stand and sing?